Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and I told you there'd be a part two to this. Right? So they finally released the documentation on the September 2025 release, and we have user-defined functions. It's a really short article. I mean, very short. So, and not much there. And then the enhanced DAX time intelligence preview, right? And then we've got some new functions that are part of that. We'll get into that. So this video is going to cover briefly. It's going to cover this announcement. It's going to cover. We're going to go kind of in depth to a degree on UDFs, which I got working. I'll show you what happened. Um, and then we're also going to take a deep dive or a little bit deeper dive on the DAX enhanced time intelligence. And then we'll wrap it all up with going in and looking at year to date features, what's gone from preview to GA, etc. There's some interesting insights in there, I think. So the first thing that I noticed in this is important update: Bing Maps visual icon, singular icon, will be removed from the default visuals list of the visualization pane. And it's talking about Bing Maps visual icon, again singular, will be removed from the default. It's like, but the problem with that is, unless I'm very much mistaken, there are two icons. There's the map icon and there's a filled map icon, and they're both Microsoft Bing Maps, right? This is my map visual. This is my filled map. So I'm assuming, right, that the language is just imprecise, and they actually meant to say icons will be removed from the default visuals list. I don't know, but I'm assuming that is the case. So that's just, maybe it's a little nitpicky, but it'd be nice if they could actually be precise in their language so we actually know what the heck. Like, why don't they just say the maps icon and the filled map icon will be going away? Like, why can't they be specific? I don't know. Anyway, so there's a lot of, I don't know why this is fine Power BI, but it's M365. I don't know why that's under Copilot AI, but anyway, a bunch of Copilot AI stuff which don't care about because it requires Fabric. And then here's your enhanced DAX time intelligence, performance analyzer, and editing a web report. That's interesting. Translytical task flows. I don't know why that's under reporting, honestly. I guess because it's in Power BI desktop. That was one of those preview features that they enabled without me asking for it. Editing semantic models in Power BI service is generally available, right? The TMDL view is generally available. I mentioned that. Live editing, Direct Lake, generally available. Download PBX, right? Fabric notebooks for Power BI practices analyzer, memory analyzer are generally available. I don't even know when that was preview. I couldn't even find that I have all the releases from like 2019 on. I don't even know when this was in preview. Anyway, here's preview stuff, bunch of previous stuff. NFC tag support in Power BI Mobile generally available. Wow, is that obscure? Anyway, so some things went generally available, but nothing that hasn't been in preview for like at least a year. Everything that went generally available has been, is between 1 year and well over 2 years old. Like 2.5 years old. So, they aren't getting stuff out very fast. But anyway, so that's kind of covers this release, right? They were definitely trying to prop this up with additional stuff, to make it look bigger than it really is. But here we go. Let's take a look at user-defined functions, which again, we have documentation on. Let's take a look at those. I want this one. Okay, so first thing with user-defined functions, what was the problem? All right, well, the problem was actually, I should have known better. I should have known better to get anything from SQL BI, right? They missed a paren. They missed an ending paren. So when I copied this and then put it in there, it was missing a paren, which that's not good that it let me, like, how do you troubleshoot that exactly? Let's go back here. So it allows you to create it wrong, essentially, right? So you can do this and say define, and it'll let you create this, even though it's not going to work. So then you start thinking, how in the hell are you going to debug these things, right? You can't really debug them while you're writing them. It just lets you do it, right? So if this is wrong, like nothing's telling me it's wrong, but it's clearly I need the n for n here, but there's nothing to tell me that this is wrong. So it's like, so I'm gonna have to develop what I want and then push it into a function definition within DAX query view. But then I might screw something up, right? And then it could not work correctly, and then I'm gonna try to use it. It's gonna give me errors or not the right answer. I don't know, man. The whole process around that seems a little shady to me, in terms of that. Now, the other thing that comes into play here is that once you have these things created, right? So I can delete it, I can rename it, but I can't actually see the definition of it. So in order to see the definition of it, I have to go to a whole different place, right? I have to go over here and then right click and then script. And now I can see how these things are defined. So now, so they do allow you to filter tables. They do allow a table to come back. So that one's going to be great when this stuff actually goes to GA. The other thing though with this is that what the hell are these things, right? So if you try to copy this, I try to copy this and put it back into here. It's like it doesn't like it, right? So I have to get rid of this, and then everything's all screwed up in terms of the formatting and all that. So I mean, this is not by any stretch of the imagination a clean way of working with this stuff or a clean process for any of this. It's just not. Um, so that's probably that's one issue with this is that it's very convoluted to work with this stuff. There's no way to debug this really, other than you have to go. So you have to like, what's the definition? Okay, and then I have to go debug it. So I have to go use it in something. I mean, it is not a clean development experience whatsoever with any of this. And the fact that they allow you to create stuff incorrectly and then it breaks is not great either. Now, something else is about UDS, like in thinking of this at an enterprise scale. It's like, so wait a second. So I'm gonna have to like keep a separate file, or I'm gonna have to go into a report that I've created and go into TMDL view, get my definitions, and then go to the next report that I'm building, and then I have to paste the definitions in here, clean them up because they don't come over cleanly from TMDL view, right? And then create them all again. Like that. And so now I have the UDF definitions in multiple locations, right? Which seems to be like, okay, how's that really any better? So the UDFs really are only reusable within the model that you're using them in. And like, how many times do you really need to reuse something within, a measure or something like that? Maybe sometimes and all of that, but I don't know. I don't know how useful they're really going to be, unless, and then you get into the enterprise scenario, like how do you manage this from an enterprise perspective? Do you have a separate model that just has a calculations table or that just contains functions essentially? So you just basically would have and then you'd live connect to that and be able to use, are you even allowed to use the live connection, functions from a live connection like that? I don't even know. That's something I'll have to test. But like, so how reusable does this make more of a mess than it solves? I think there's a legitimate question around that, that we'll just have to see. Uh, are they interesting? Absolutely, they're interesting. Am I going to use them for anything production? Hell no. I mean, not on your life, until these things get to GA, right? So I'll probably experiment with them and do some things on them and maybe make some more videos on them. But I don't know. It's going to definitely change some things in DAX, but I mean, maybe 3 years from now, right? And the average to preview seems to be somewhere between a year and 8 years, right? For shape map, it'll never go live. It just keeps drawing on and drawing on, but it's a preview feature that's like 8 years old. So what we can say is that sometime between about a year and 8 years from now, we'll be able to use user-defined functions. Great. All right. So now the other thing that they came out with was this enhanced time intelligence, which is another kind of interesting thing. And the way they decided to go about and solve this is one, which again, it's like it's been. I don't mean to be too negative about this, but you solved this after 10 years, Microsoft, and you didn't even solve all the problems. You just solved a couple of them, right? After 10 years. And it's going to be another year to 8 years before this gets out of preview to GA, right? Probably on average is going to be 2 to 3 years. It seems that that's what's taking, preview to GA features. That's how long it's taking these days. And I'll show you why that is here in a bit. But what they do is you have to go in and define a calendar and then define every single like category for time intelligence that you're going to want um, for that calendar. And it's a miserable process. And let me show you. So you go here and let's see. Well, I'll just go like to my custom 445, and now I have calendar options. All right, so now I can do new calendar, and let's call this fiscal 445. And so it starts with a year, and so I can say, okay, year, right? And then I can add a category. So my next one is day, week of year. So day of week number, day of week number. So I'll add that, and then I'll say day of week number, and it yells at me and gives this whole huge thing. But basically what I have to do is I have to say, okay, week, and like what is like, okay, so it's they'd say they have an unavailable week, like week of quarter, week of year, like is week. So what is week, right? What is it supposed to be the week of the year? Is it the sequential week, like in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? I don't really know that. I can maybe guess that it's sequential week number, maybe, right? But because the week of the year, I think this week number, this is sequential week, so it goes, it's 1 to whatever, as far as this is a 2 years of a date table, right? So I guess like week number of year would be this that's quarter week number, right? So do they have that? Do they have week of quarter? I can add that and say quarter week number, and it's yelling at me about something. The quarter of week requires the quarter or the quarter first. So okay, I got to add my quarter, and then the quarter is this Q here, and then I want to add month, right? Month. And then I would say month with month name. And then you can like validate this data, and now it's yelling at me, right? There's an unexpected relationship between the primary columns for the year and quarter. A one-to-many relationship was expected. A one-to-many. So it's like, is this, am I supposed to be using, or this is quarter? It's very unclear what you're, and just, okay, so you got to define this. Then you have to define this for every single time that you want to use a fiscal calendar. You have to manually set this up within your data model. It's like that seems like a miserable experience to me. Um, but I mean, because think about it. What would you rather do? Every time that so for 10 years, Microsoft, you have not solved this problem, right? And it's going to be another 2 probably before it is. So it's going to be 12 years. So for 12 years, people have used offsets. They're custom fiscal calendars, and they've used offsets to solve this problem. Now, what makes sense to you, Microsoft, that people are going to suddenly, when this becomes a generally available, they're like, oh, I've done it this way for 12 years, but I'm going to switch to this other way of doing it, which is miserable, and I have to set it up for every time that I create a new model. Versus I connect to my date table, I import it, and I'm good to go, and all my calculations work, right? This is extra steps on top of that for what? Because the time intelligence functions are so great? No, I've already shown in, I Spit on Your Grave, that video, that time intelligence functions are actually slower than doing a no calculate approach to time intelligence, right? So that's not good. So I'm going to take extra steps and just, I mean, I already want to like shove a fork in my eye just trying to do this right here. This is miserable experience. They don't explain anything about what anything is and what anything's supposed to be. So anyway, I don't see it. Like, why would people change how they've done it for over a decade, right? Because you failed to fix this issue. I just think it's too little, too late. I really do. I don't think this is gonna. I don't think hardly anybody's gonna use this. I mean, Microsoft finally fixed their problem. It was just they took so long to do it and it's done in such a miserable manner, in such a miserable way that I don't see people using this feature. This seems like an awful, awful way to do this, right? So I don't know. Now they did introduce again. They introduced weak functions finally. Again, after after a decade, right? After a decade, they introduced total week to date. They introduced dates week to date, opening balance week, starting balance week, all the week stuff. They're so new, they don't even show up in the list of new DAX functions, right? So refresh this. That's how new they are. They don't even show up here in the list of new DAX functions, but they are brand new because they just showed up. If you look at the actual next week, let's go with next week. So yeah, 9/16/2025. Anyway, so yeah, they're brand new. So yes, yay, we have week, but again, the problem that is not solved in any of this, in my opinion, is they still have not solved the inflexibility part of this. So okay, they solved week, they solved that you can do fiscal calendars finally, right? Well, not solved because it's preview, but the problem that isn't solved is if you do like this is doing dates year to date, right? For today, essentially. But the problem is it includes today, right? And there's no way to make it not include that day, right? So this is the inflexibility part because you shouldn't be surprised. In a lot of times, I would say it's probably 50-50 in terms of how year to date is calculated in a lot of places. It doesn't include the current day. And the reason it doesn't include the current day is because it's not a full day. So you're comparing apples to oranges at that point. So if you're trying to compare like to last year's sales year to date and you include today's sales in it, but they're incomplete, then you don't want to do that. And so that's the inflexible part to a large degree of the time intelligence functions and the way they work. They just assume too many things, right? They used to just assume, a Gregorian calendar. And now you can kind of fix that if you want to have a miserable experience, like as miserable as you can possibly be, like you can fix it now, but don't do that because it's preview. It's not GA. But even when it goes to GA, it'd be nice if there was some like auto recognition, like, oh, this looks like this looks like this. That would be nice to have in that functionality, because otherwise, hey man, what a miserable time it's going to be to have to set that up every single time in your data model versus, hey, I've already got my great offsets table, for date table, and I can just use it and all the calculations I've always used, work with it. That seems like a much better solution. So I don't know, man. It's like I said, a lot of this stuff that Microsoft's dug themselves such a deep hole by not fixing basic crap like this, right? That now when they go and fix it, it's meaningless to a large degree, I think. All right, let's switch gears and let's take a look at the the features and all that sort of. I don't know why that didn't switch to that, even though I selected it. So at first glance with this, I think that it's like, okay, look at all these features they're delivering, Greg, and look, they're all the way up to GA, to 9 features, right? Which we've got at least 2 left. I don't know if they're going to do a December release or not, because they did a January release in 2025, and usually they skip January. They have a December release and then they skip January. So I don't know if they're going to have an extra release this year and they release December, or if they're going to skip December again. I don't know. But it gets a little interesting in terms of when you start really delving into it, in terms of like, here's that. If we see here 9, let's say that let's take out this one. So this is the last release. So if you take that out, this drops to 4 preview to GA. So they more than doubled, right, the number of preview to GA features in this release. And then if the other thing that I thought was interesting is like if you take out the fabric, so fabric is no, it you can really see that, okay, a lot of what they're doing is really around fabric, right? So this drops to 6 from 9. This drops to 86 from 135, right? So most of what they're doing involves fabric, I would say. A lot of what they're doing is fabric these days. At least half of all of this is related to fabric stuff versus not Power BI desktop and that. So I think that's total validation of what I've been saying about, that development's completely shifted away from desktop, and that's why things that are going on in desktop is at such a slow pace. And then if we take a look at the NFC tags, that's like over a year ago. That was like a year ago that went to preview. But like, who uses that? TMW, again, I guess people are going to use it more once UDFs come out because you have to basically to even take a look at your UDF to see how it's defined, right? But that was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Live editing and direct link, semantic models. I That one's over a year as well. Editing semantic models, that's like 2 years ago that first went into preview. Fabric notebooks, this one I couldn't even find. I couldn't even find when this was preview. So I don't know if they just like said, oh, well, we came out with this feature and we'll call it GA, but I can't even find when this went from preview to GA. So this might not even be correct that I've classified it this way. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely a big release. I mean, obviously UDFs are going to change things whenever they eventually GA. The enhanced time intelligence stuff, I don't really see people using that. They've spent a decade and they'll spent probably like 12 years without that capability and using offsets, with their fiscal calendars, right? Why would they change how they've done it for that long, right? Maybe it'll change how people approach it in the future that have never had to deal with fiscal calendars and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't see the advantage. So I'm going to have to go through all this work in my setup for on top of, when I import my date table, then I got to do all this manual setup on top of it. And then it's going to be slower than if I just didn't use it anyway and used offsets. Like, I don't see why that makes any amount of sense at all. But anyway, there's part 2 for you. All right, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.